The Vicarious Pain Questionnaire contains 16 videos showing pain and a series of questions that ask participants about their experience whilst watching the videos. This is an example of a video. And these are the questions that follow the video. The first one is, did you experience any bodily sensation of pain whilst observing the rugby tackle? The second one is, how unpleasant did you find the experience of watching this video? If the participants answer yes to the first question, then there are a few other questions that they are asked to answer, such as to rate how painful the experience was for them, from 1 very mild pain to 10 highly intense pain, to describe if they felt the pain in a specific location or if it was a more generally bodily feeling. So it can be generalized, localized, but not in the same location, and localized to the same location as the observed pain. And then they are also asked to select adjectives that would describe their experience. The first 10 adjectives are sensory adjectives such as stinging, sharp, dull, stiff, and so on. And the last 10 adjectives are describe a more affective quality of the pain, such as aversion, fearful, terrifying, sickening, and so on. Then we download their responses from Qualtrics in an Excel file that looks like this. So these are the responses of our participants. These are all the questions and their answers. And we calculate a few variables. The first variable that we calculate, we call it total pain responses, TPR. So this is the number of times that they answered yes to after watching a video. So in this case, we have this participant answered yes in 6 out of the 16 videos. After total pain responses, we calculate the average intensity. So it's just the mean of the intensity that they reported for the pain that they felt, the bodily sensation of pain that they felt whilst watching the video. And regularity, we also asked them at the end if they had felt a bodily sensation of pain in the past and how frequent that was. We calculate 2 other variables. One is called localized minus generalized. This is the number of times that they reported a localized feeling of pain minus the number of times that they reported a general affective pain. So localized same, this is the numbers of times they said that they felt the pain in the same location as the observed pain or to a different location. So we sum this up and then we subtract the generalized feelings. So localized minus generalized is localized same plus localized different minus general effect. The sensory affective variable, we first count the number of times that they used each adjective to describe their pain, and the sensory minus affective variable is the sum of all the sensory adjectives minus the sum of all the affective adjectives. So these are these are the variables that we use. So what we do after, we take these variables into the SPSS file. We have tested quite a lot of a few participants, and we have a large database by now. The cluster analysis that we will run in a second is more robust if the database is larger. So that's why we just keep all the participants when we run it. So, and then we copy these variables as well. So these are our variables that will go into the cluster analysis. But if we just run a correlation, in a cluster analysis, we can't really use variables that strongly correlate. So for this reason, I will just quickly show you. Okay. So if we run a correlation, we can see that total pain, as expected, total pain responses strongly correlate with average intensity and with regularity as well. So we can't use all these three variables in our cluster analysis. We'll have to pick one of them. We pick the average intensity, not completely randomly, but because we ran a test-retest reliability, and we found out that the average intensity is the variable that generates the more robust results and the ones that stay the same over time. So the variables that we use in our cluster analysis are average intensity, localized minus generalized, and sensory minus affective. It is a two-step cluster analysis. The first step of the analysis, it's a hierarchical cluster analysis. So if we go to analyze, then classify, then hierarchical cluster, and then we choose our variables, intensity, localized minus generalized, and sensory minus affective. The statistics, here we need to specify the number of clusters. So we want three clusters because two clusters would literally separate our participants into non-responders and responders, and we want to find out something more than just this. So we also want to separate the responders into two groups: the sensory localized group with more localized feeling of pain, and the affective general group with a generalized feeling of pain and more affective qualities. Then we go to method, and we choose words method with a squared Euclidean distance, and because our variables do not have the same scale, we standardize them by z-scores. Continue. Save. This will generate a column with the clusters. So again, number of clusters 3. Continue and OK. This takes a while. So this analysis just puts the participants together in 3 clusters depending on how similar their variables are, their responses are. And if we go back to this file, we can see here the clusters, the groups. So there are like 3 different clusters, and each participant was put into one. This is the first step, and these steps generates the first clusters. And also what we need to do now is to find out the means of each variable in each cluster. So if we just go to analyze, compare means, our independent variable would be the cluster, and our dependent list will be our variables again. Okay, and we just have to do OK, and then we get the means. These means will go into a cluster centroid file that we will have to use for our second part of the analysis, the k-means analysis, which needs centroids, cluster centroids. So these are the centroids of our clusters. I just copied them from the output file into a file that looks exactly like this. So we have our groups, our clusters, 1, 2, 3, and each variable with its mean for each cluster. The second step of the analysis is the k-means analysis. So we go again, analyze, classify, k-means cluster. Our variables stay the same all the time. Our number of clusters is still 3. We iterate 50 times, and we also save the cluster membership. And we need to read our cluster centroids. So we go read initial external data file, then we take the file cluster centroids, open, and OK. So this analysis takes the initial clusters and it generates more robust clusters. So these are the initial clusters that we specified, the initial cluster centers that we specified, and these are the new ones that are generated by this analysis, and these are the new groups. So yeah, some groups change, some groups stay the same, most of them stay the same. I think this is a more robust result. And if we look back at the output, so we have group 1, which is the non-responders with like values very close to 0 for all the variables. We have the second group, which is the general effective group, as you can see, because basically they report more generalized filling and they also use more effective adjectives. And the third group is the sensory localized group, because they report a more localized feeling, and also they use more sensory adjectives to describe their feeling. And yeah, these are the final groups basically, and the final clusters.